The most important question you need to answer as you head into your fantasy football drafts is who you're going to take in the first round. Today, we're running through a mock draft of just the first round as I break down the top 12 players coming off of my draft board. But before we dig in, head over to 4for4.com and use promo code YouTube to get 25% off any subscription plan. At the very top of the draft, there is one tier with 3 players in it, in my opinion. The only difference between our 101 and the 102 and 103 is only one of those guys is a running back, and he could easily outpace the entire position. It's a pretty chalky pick, but we're going to start things off here with Christian McCaffrey. At the 102, we will pivot over to the wide receiver position and take the guy who led the entire league in targets last year. CeeDee Lamb is still on the Dallas Cowboys, but many of his teammates are not. Tony Pollard, a pass-catching back, Michael Gallup, Jalen Tolbert is still in town. Brandon Cooks is still in town. But CeeDee Lamb has the possibility of once again leading the league in targets, one of the most pass-centric offenses in the league. At the 103, we're going to go with an aging veteran who still happens to be possibly the most explosive player in the game. In the Miami Dolphins' nearly impossible to defend offense, Tyreek Hill continues to string together huge games even though he missed a couple of games last season. He has the chance to string together yet another 1,700-yard performance this season, regardless of how much work Jalen Waddle takes. As we head into the second tier of fantasy options ahead of our 2024 fantasy drafts, it's kind of a coin flip between 2 running backs for me. This is a pretty large tier, maybe 4, maybe 5 players. They're kind of interchangeable, but I think that the ceiling of these 2 running backs going in the middle to early portions of the draft are just exceptional. Down in Atlanta, we have a new OC. Arthur Smith is gone. We have a new quarterback. Desmond Ridder and, Marcus Mariota and whatever they've been dealing with for years is gone. We have Kirk Cousins. We have Zach Robinson. As a rookie, Bijan Robinson ranked 32nd in rush attempt share at only 41%, yet finished the year as the RB17 in that miserable offense. He did so on 83 targets and a solid 4.5 yards per carry. Though we do have Tyler Algier, who I do love as a backup and would love to attack in any sort of builds that I don't have Bijan. I'm going to go with Bijan here. I think he offers one of only 3 possible guys who aren't CMC that could be the overall running back 1. So we're going to go to Bijan here, and we're just going to keep going with the running backs. Both these guys, I think, are a little bit higher on my boards than typical ADP, but they're all in the same kind of section. I'm going to go with Breece Hall, who is also incredibly potent pass catcher at the running back position and just a rusher in general on what was a miserable offense, kind of similar to how Bijan was handled last year. We've obviously got no Aaron Rodgers last year. He logged, 3 or 4 snaps. He's stuck in a just QB purgatory down there, but he was still exceptional. From week 5 on last season, he led all running backs in touches and was second to only Saquon Barkley in touches per game. I think he could have that same kind of workload. The competition in his backfield is a little bit better this season. I do like Braylon Allen, and is someone that I don't mind targeting with my very last pick. But I think Breece Hall has a very good opportunity to be a top 3 running back. And if things break right, if CMC misses some time, I think he could be the RB1. Heading into the 106, we're going to pivot back to the wide receivers and stay here for a few more picks. We're going to go to another explosive offense, similar to Tyreek Hill, if not quite as incredible. We're going to go to Cincinnati, and I'm going to take Ja'Marr Chase as my 6th most important fantasy piece of the 2024 season. Ja'Marr Chase was tasked with playing in 7 games without quarterback Joe Burrow. He scored only 9.8 half PPR points per game in those contests while missing 1 game himself, and he still finished as the overall wide receiver 13. That should give us a good idea of what the absolute floor is for Chase as we head into 2024, and it's not too shabby. The ceiling, on the other hand, is fantastic. Over the last 3 seasons, Chase has averaged 9.6 targets, 6.2 receptions, 87 yards, and 16.1 half PPR points per game with Joe Burrow in the lineup, whether that quarterback was healthy or not. And we've also obviously seen Burrow handle some issues with health over the years. He could be in the same kind of shape this year, but I'm willing to bet on the upside and just take a risk here with Chase, who could fall back into the wide receiver 2 realm if Burrow ends up missing time again. At the 107, we're going to stick at the wide receiver position and take another guy that I'm just betting on the upside. even if his floor is a little riskier than we would like. I think most would agree that Justin Jefferson, if he is not the best wide receiver in the league, he is certainly top 3. We know this full season is going to be with Sam Darnold unless they move to Nick Mullins or Jaren Hall, which seems quite unlikely without some sort of injury risk. But Jefferson is just so exceptional. I think he could be quarterback proof. If we still had Cousins in town, there'd be an argument that Jefferson should be the number 1 overall pick, which he was in that conversation last year, of course, at this time. I just love his upside. I think with Addison possibly missing some time due to suspension, and he's kind of dealing with an injury right now himself. TJ Hawkinson might not be back until October. Maybe this offense doesn't look incredible. We might have a 30% target share receiver on our hand, and doesn't matter what offense you're in. If you have that type of target share, you're worth a first-round pick. Here at the 108, we will once again stick with the wide receiver position and what I believe is kind of the end of a tier. Everything from the 104 to the 108 here, I would probably take any of these 5 guys at the 104. I could be argued into it. Maybe not especially Jefferson, because I think his floor could be so low as long as, Burrow's still healthy. I think Jefferson's floor is far lower than Ja'Marr Chase or St. Brown or Hall or Robinson. But Amon-Ra St. Brown's floor is so exceptional that this could be like as low as he goes. If everything clicks in the Lions offense, ASRB could be, the wide receiver 5 on a down year. In his 3rd season, Amon-Ra St. Brown once again eclipsed 90 receptions, this time really outdoing himself with a 119 reception, 1,510 season on 161 targets. That was the 5th most in the league among any position. He was one of the most consistent, valuable assets in all of fantasy, but particularly in PPR leagues, where he scored less than 15 points in 3 of 16 games. That's an exceptional floor. There's no reason to believe that's not replicable, considering rookie tight end Sam Laporta gobbled up 120 targets and still didn't impact St. Brown's zone-beating role. His floor is huge, and his ceiling, we probably saw it last year, but if he can turn some of that into even more touchdowns. He scored 10, but so did Sam Laporta. So if a couple of those went to St. Brown, we could be talking about the overall wide receiver 2 right now. 109, I believe this is mostly a tier as well. So we've got the 1 through 3, the 4 through 8, and then this 9 to 12 is kind of all a tier of it in and of itself, at least for my board. At 9, we're going to stick with yet another wide receiver here. We're going to go to A.J. Brown. Brown and the Eagles offense didn't have the most exceptional second half of the year. That collapse was, barely kept him in the playoffs, and then they had a quick exit anyways. But regardless of that, Brown still finished as fantasy's wide receiver 5, and he also had the 8th highest per game average in half PPR. He was the wide receiver 4 the year before with the 7th highest per game average. Just a model of consistency. We now have Kellen Moore over there to run the offense. I think we could see less of a collapse like we did last year. Anytime you talk about the Eagles scoring touchdowns, you have to talk about Jalen Hurts at the goal line. That tush push isn't going away. Jason Kelce is incredible, but he's out of the picture, and now Cam Jurgens is in at center, who also looks like he's going to be pretty darn good as well. So there's kind of a cap on his ceiling. We also have Devontae Smith to deal with in Philadelphia, but A.J. Brown has just been super consistent, and I think he's going to continue that this year, and he's worth a look as a top 5 option at his position. For the 110, we're once again going back to the Lions offense. Maybe I'm just remembering last year too fondly, but I think there's even more upside for Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs more than paid off as a fantasy asset as a rookie on a per-game basis, particularly in the receiving game. His 69 targets were tied for 7th highest with Austin Eckler, while his 52 receptions tied for 9th most with Joe Mixon and Tyjae Spears. There's not much reason to think those numbers will fall off, and he also missed some time last year, so we could have been seeing a top 5 receiving back in year 1, getting used to the speed of the NFL right off the bat. David Montgomery is still in town. Montgomery was incredible last year. He took all the Jamal Williams goal line usage. If Gibbs can sniff a little bit more of that this season, or, forbid Montgomery misses a little time, Jahmyr Gibbs would be, we would be taking him in, weekly DFS contests as a top 2 option every week. So there are some, there's some things to worry about here. There's DMOT, and then there's obviously ASRB, who we already talked about, who could, take a huge amount of that target share this year. Jameson Williams is, progressing. Is he really a wide receiver 2 we need to be worried about? I think Gibbs could finish this season as the number two pass catcher on this team. I don't think that's crazy to think. I do love Sam Laporta, but there's a chance, Gibbs gets targeted 100 times. It happens often with these kind of dynamic backs. Think about Eckler in his heyday and CMC now, and plenty of others. I'm fine with taking Gibbs as a first round pick, and I think this is a little bit above consensus, but I'm here for it. At the 111, we're again going back to New York. We're going to the Jets. We're going to target Garrett Wilson with a healthy Aaron Rodgers back. And, they did add some new faces. We have Mike Williams, who could be back for the beginning of the season. He's just freshly off the PUP list. Garrett's looking for that breakout season, and I think here in year 3, that could be the exact scenario we see here. Many film watchers are huge proponents of Garrett Wilson's since he came out of Ohio State. I think this is absolutely a possibility that he becomes a mainstay. He locks himself into the first round of drafts, into the beginning of first rounds of drafts come next year. I think some of the older running backs who are being taken around this ADP in a lot of drafts are not going to produce the kind of year that Garrett Wilson is going to produce here in 2024. Finally, to wrap up the first round here with the 12th overall selection, to take one more running back who's kind of been all over the place in ADP. Kyren Williams. Obviously, the Rams took Blake Corum in the 3rd round. He kind of profiles a lot like Kyren Williams, so it's not the best look. Kyren had a foot injury earlier in the offseason, missed OTAs. Not a good look. Sean McVay has said that he wants more of a split backfield this season. Not a good look. A lot of these things have pushed him down draft boards. At one point, he was at the end of the 2nd round for a little bit. Now he's kind of snuck back up. I'm not really buying it. He had something like 78% of the backfield touches last season. That's huge. That's so outsized of anyone else in the league who's not a CMC or a couple of the guys we talked about earlier. That could drop to 70%, and he's still a top 5 option, a top 6 option. The Rams have proven that they can bounce back, particularly last year, and become this top 10 offense even when we count them out. Stafford's getting up there in age, Kupp's getting up there in age, Puka Nacua is coming off of an injury. I still think they're going to be a very strong offense. I think Kyren Williams is going to be the driving force of that. And if he can continue to score touchdowns at the rate he has when given the opportunity, that creates an even higher ceiling than his high floor, if that makes sense. I'm here for Kyren at the end of the 1st round. So there you have it. Those are the 12 guys going off my draft boards. Let us know who you would be taking in the 1st round and who you'd be kicking out of this list.